In the autumn of 1915, somewhere on a DuPont property in northern Delaware, a construction crew was carrying out work that should have been routine. Men were clearing earth, preparing a foundation, and digging into what appeared to be an ordinary section of private estate land. Then the excavation reportedly reached a depth of roughly 12 feet. The workers struck stone. At first, there was nothing extraordinary about that. Construction crews encountered buried rock, old foundations, and disturbed soil regularly. But as the men cleared away the earth, the stone reportedly revealed something different, a remarkably flat surface made from large blocks that appeared to have been deliberately fitted together. The surface continued beyond the limits of the trench. Then another feature emerged. A straight channel was reportedly cut into the stone, while nearby the workers encountered what appeared to be the beginning of a wall extending farther into the earth. If the account is accurate, this was not simply a buried rock formation. It appeared to be something constructed. And that raised a question that would become more difficult with every passing decade. What was a deliberately built structure doing beneath the ground of a DuPont property, and why was the excavation reportedly stopped before anyone could properly identify it? More than a century later, however, there is an important problem. There is no known archaeological excavation report that conclusively identifies the structure. No authenticated photograph has established what the workers supposedly saw. No surviving survey allows the trench to be reconstructed with certainty. What remains is a story. And to understand what that story might mean, we first have to understand the world in which it supposedly happened. By 1915, the DuPont name was already deeply connected to northern Delaware. The family's Delaware story began in the early 19th century, when Eleuthère Irénée DuPont established a gunpowder operation along the Brandywine River. The location offered important advantages, including water power and access to transportation and raw materials. Over generations, the operation expanded. Mills, roads, buildings, worker communities, laboratories, gardens, and private properties transformed the surrounding landscape. The important point is that these properties were not untouched wilderness. They were layered landscapes. One generation built something, another altered it. A later generation might demolish a building, change a road, cover a drainage system, or construct something new over the remains of an earlier structure. That makes buried masonry on old property entirely possible without requiring anything mysterious. Foundations can disappear beneath soil. Drainage channels can be forgotten. Industrial structures can be dismantled while their lower portions remain underground. Land can be graded and reshaped until earlier features become invisible. And after enough time passes, even people living on the same property may no longer know precisely what existed there before them. The year 1915 was also a period of significant industrial and scientific development for the DuPont family and its businesses. Historical records document DuPont activity involving engineering, chemical research, and new industrial projects. In other words, construction and technological development were normal parts of the environment. So when the alleged excavation began, there was nothing unusual about workers digging into the ground. The unusual part came later. According to the surviving version of the story, the crew was preparing a foundation on estate property. The first several feet of excavation reportedly produced nothing remarkable. Then the soil changed. The workers supposedly encountered unusually compact earth that appeared to have been disturbed and filled at some earlier time. That detail is important, but it is not mysterious by itself. Previously disturbed soil is exactly what workers might expect around an old foundation, drainage system, road, or demolished building. Then came the stone. The first impact might have been mistaken for bedrock. But as the earth was removed, the workers reportedly saw a level surface composed of large blocks. More stone appeared as the excavation continued. The surface seemed to extend beyond the trench. Then came the reported channel. A straight depression cut into the masonry appeared to run across part of the exposed surface. Nearby, the workers reportedly uncovered what looked like a wall continuing downward into the earth. At that point, the discovery appeared to be larger than a single buried object. The natural question would have been, how large was it? A systematic investigation could have answered at least some of that. The exposed area could have been measured. The wall could have been mapped. The channel could have been photographed. The masonry could have been examined. And someone with architectural, engineering, historical, or archaeological expertise could have attempted to identify the structure. According to the later account, however, that did not happen. The foreman reportedly informed estate management. Then the excavation stopped. The exposed area was allegedly covered. The trench was filled, and the workers moved on. That is the point where the story becomes a historical mystery. But it is also the point where caution becomes essential. A decision to stop construction does not automatically indicate a cover-up. A private estate could halt excavation for many ordinary reasons. The structure might have been considered unsafe. The construction plan might have changed. Continuing the work might have been too expensive. The feature might have been privately identified as an old foundation. Or the story itself may have changed during decades of retelling. That final possibility matters because much of the alleged discovery comes through later accounts rather than a surviving contemporary investigation. Oral history can preserve genuine events. Workers talk to relatives. Families remember unusual experiences. Stories survive long after official documents disappear. But memory is not a recording device. Measurements can change. Locations can become less precise. Separate events can become combined. And later generations may unintentionally add interpretations that were never part of the original experience. That does not make oral history useless. It means it must be treated differently from a contemporary engineering report or archaeological excavation. The worker's story may tell us what people remembered. It does not, by itself, prove every detail of what happened. And that leads to the central problem. If the structure was really discovered, where is the documentation? Where are the measurements? Where are the photographs? Where is the engineering report? Where is the newspaper account? Where is the archaeological record? Without those things, we cannot determine the age of the stonework. We cannot identify its original purpose. We cannot establish who built it. And we cannot demonstrate that it was something historically extraordinary. That brings us to the first explanation. Perhaps the workers simply discovered the remains of an earlier structure that had been forgotten. That is entirely plausible. Northern Delaware had a long history of farming, settlement, industry, and private development. DuPont properties themselves were repeatedly modified. A buried foundation would not be surprising. A drainage feature would not be surprising. An abandoned industrial structure would not be surprising. Even a large masonry surface could have had a practical purpose that was forgotten over time. There is no need for an ancient civilization or secret underground complex to explain such a discovery. But there is another question. If the structure was ordinary, why was it reportedly not investigated? Why refill the excavation before its dimensions and purpose had been established? Why not document what was visible? These questions do not prove that anything was deliberately concealed. But they explain why the story survived. The mystery may not be what the workers discovered. The mystery may be why the opportunity to find out more disappeared so quickly. And that distinction becomes even more important when we consider the evidence that was lost when the trench was filled. Archaeological evidence depends heavily on context. A stone by itself tells us very little. A stone within a wall tells us more. A wall connected to a floor, channel, foundation, and surrounding soil can reveal considerably more. Once those relationships are destroyed or concealed, interpretation becomes much harder. If the story is accurate, the workers briefly exposed exactly the kind of context that could have answered the questions. Then the ground was closed again. And with it disappeared the best opportunity to investigate. There is another complication. The phrase, DuPont estate, can make the location sound more precise than it actually is. The DuPont family controlled and developed multiple properties across northern Delaware, involving different family members and different periods of construction. If later accounts did not preserve the exact property, then even finding the correct location today could be difficult. And without the location, modern archaeological testing becomes far less useful. This is why serious historical investigation depends on maps, property records, construction documents, photographs, newspapers, architectural plans, and other contemporary sources. The problem with this story is that the surviving evidence does not currently allow the alleged excavation to be reconstructed with that level of precision. That does not prove the event never happened. It simply limits what we can responsibly conclude. And this is where historical mysteries often go wrong. An undocumented discovery becomes an ancient structure. An ancient structure becomes a lost civilization. A missing report becomes evidence of a cover-up. A family story becomes proof of a conspiracy. The investigator has to move in the opposite direction. Strip away what cannot be demonstrated. Separate documented history from later memory. Then examine what remains. What remains is still interesting. The DuPont properties existed within a landscape that had been heavily modified over generations. Industrial development, construction, engineering, agriculture, and private estate projects all left physical traces behind. So the possibility that workers encountered forgotten masonry in 1915 is reasonable. What cannot currently be established is the extraordinary part of the story. We cannot prove that the structure had no known historical explanation. We cannot prove that it was unusually ancient. We cannot prove that estate officials were attempting to hide it. And we cannot prove that the workers' account has survived in exactly its original form. There is, however, a larger historical lesson here. Modern landscapes often conceal older ones. A road can cover an earlier road. A building can stand above an older foundation. A garden can hide a demolished structure. A drainage channel can survive underground long after its purpose has been forgotten. And sometimes the only evidence that something existed comes from people who remember seeing it. That makes the alleged 1915 discovery fascinating even without an extraordinary explanation. Because the story sits between history and memory. It is not fully documented. But it is not necessarily disproven either. It is a claim that requires more evidence than currently survives. So what did the workers reportedly uncover beneath the DuPont property in 1915? The most defensible answer is also the most cautious. They may have encountered a previously unknown or forgotten man-made structure. That possibility fits the history of the landscape. But there is not enough surviving evidence to determine exactly what the structure was, when it was built, who constructed it, or why it was there. The reported decision to refill the excavation is intriguing. But without contemporary documentation, we cannot know why that decision was made. It may have been practical. It may have been related to construction. It may have involved an old foundation that someone recognized privately. Or it may have been remembered differently over time. Perhaps a forgotten construction ledger, property map, private letter, photograph, or engineering document will someday provide the missing piece. Until then, the story remains suspended between possibility and proof. And perhaps that is why it has survived for more than a century. The workers may have uncovered something beneath the ground. But what survives today is not the structure itself. It is the question, what was really beneath that Delaware field? Was it simply an earlier foundation, an industrial feature, a forgotten part of the estate, or a discovery whose true significance was never understood? We do not have enough evidence to choose the most extraordinary answer. What we can say is that the opportunity to investigate the reported structure was apparently lost. And once that opportunity disappeared, the mystery became part of history itself. Sometimes history does not vanish because someone deliberately destroys it. Sometimes it disappears because no one realizes, at the time, that they are looking at something worth preserving. In 1915, according to the surviving account, a group of workers opened a brief window into the ground beneath the DuPont property. For a moment, something buried was visible. Then the earth closed over it again. And more than a century later, the most important question may not be what was hidden beneath the property. It may be why no one ever had the chance to find out. If you enjoyed this investigation, subscribe to the Last Cartographer for more forgotten places, lost evidence, archaeological mysteries, and unexplained chapters of history. If the workers really uncovered a constructed stone structure in 1915, what do you think it most likely was?